Okay, so pardon the setup, I'm in the break room. So the gist of, come on, the gist of hydration is two main things. There's your water intake that everybody talks about, okay? And then electrolytes that a lot of people have been talking about lately, right? So people think generally that hydration is just water. That's not really true. So water, the purpose of which in nature is to act as like a what's called a courier for minerals. Okay, specifically electrolytes, right? So if you think about it, like in nature, if somebody says that they're thirsty, or even like now, if somebody says that they're thirsty, they think they need water. They really need the minerals that's in the water. Okay. The problem with nowadays is that generally, like for tap water and stuff like that, a lot of the minerals aren't there anymore. And if you buy bottled water or something like that, it's been purified in such a way where there's not going to be nearly as many, if any, minerals at all. So the irony is that if you're drinking a lot of like bottled water and stuff like that, it's actually going to dehydrate you. Because what ends up happening is that it's like, say if I drink a lot of bottled water because I'm thirsty, right? What happens is the water wants to be at a certain level of like it wants to have a certain level of minerals in it. So if they're pulled out of it during the bottling process, it'll strip those minerals from your body so that it can reestablish. That's where I was thinking about homeostasis. It wants to reestablish homeostasis. So it'll take the minerals out of you and you'll actually urinate them out. So drinking a lot of bottled water, if it says that it's purified, right? We don't want that. We want, if you're going to do water at all, my recommendation would be to do spring water. And the reason why is that it retains its minerals, and it also tells you where it's coming from by law. So if you get like Ozarka or something like that, that's what I drink. It'll tell you like it comes from a spring in Texas or whatever. So yeah, so generally speaking, like bottled water, tap water is a no-go, because it'll strip minerals out of your body and actually dehydrate you, because the water wants to maintain a certain level of mineral content. It does that by taking it out of your body, which we don't want, right? Okay. So but yeah, so if you're talking about water intake, I would do spring, if you're able to, and then I would do no more than about a gallon a day per day. Okay. And I would split that up, like try and front load it. So like if this is like morning and night, or I guess AM, let's say PM, okay? And this is your day, I would try and have like as much of your water toward the beginning of the day rather than the end, because you don't want to get up at night and just pee it all out, right? So try and front load your water as best you can. Oh, and my last thing on hydration with water intake specifically is try and space your food and fluid intake. Intake like 20 minutes apart. And what I mean by that is stagger. So stagger your food and fluid intake. The reason why is if you have food and fluid together, right? What happens is it mixes up in your stomach, right? And then your body has to work that much harder to separate the two from each other again, back into their respective parts. So long story short, like if you imagine, like say if I have a meal, right, and I chase it with like a liter of water, it's mixing up in my stomach, and then it's going to take that much longer for it to separate the food from the fluid before it can absorb either one. So in that case, if I were to have them on top of each other, I'm impeding both digestion and hydration, which is a not good thing, right? Because imagine like your stomach's all bloated from that. You don't want that. So my recommendation is to stagger food and fluid intake about 20 minutes apart from each other. So for example, if I have a meal like I'm having right now, I would have a meal, and then I'm going to set a timer or a stopwatch on my watch, okay, for like 20 minutes, or a timer on your phone or something for 20 minutes before I have any fluid in the shaker cup that I was telling you about. So the move is have your food or fluid, either or, and then wait 20 minutes before having the other. Okay, that's going to help a lot with hydration and digestion. So it'll greatly mitigate bloating and all that stuff. So that's good. Okay, so the last piece here, real quick, electrolytes. So there's 4 of them, right? There's sodium, potassium, calcium, which we talked about a little bit, and magnesium, okay? So they each have their own role, but they work synergistically together, and it's important that you have the right amounts. So if I have like a graph here, it's important that they all have their respective ratios so that there's this homeostasis between them. You don't want any one of them to be too high or too low, otherwise you get out of homeostasis. So where I'm going with this is like generally for most people, you want about let's say like a gram, like let's just say to be safe, like 500 to 800, that's an 8 milligrams per meal. Okay, a lot of times, by the way, females, women tend to not salt their foods because they think it'll bloat them. The opposite's actually the truth, and this is where I was going with this. So say if you don't have enough salt, like enough sodium in your level, like imagine the bar's not there and it's the pen. So if you're like way down here for your sodium and everything else is up here, what ends up happening is your body wants to establish homeostasis again, so it will lower the bar, it will eliminate the other 3. So if I have like my 4 electrolytes, right, and I have way too much sodium and all these over here like magnesium, calcium, potassium right down here, and I have way too much sodium, then it will eliminate it to reestablish homeostasis. But in the case of a lot of women, if I'm not having enough sodium, right, like this, and I have a decent amount of the other 3, it will eliminate them to reestablish homeostasis, or it'll try to retain water in order to reestablish that. So what ends up happening is the ironic thing is that you will actually hold more water, right, in order for your body to get any amount of sodium that it can, because you're consciously restricting it. Does that kind of make sense? So yeah, you don't want to limit salt intake. It sounds counterintuitive, but make sure that you have a decent amount so that your body doesn't retain water in an effort to get it where you're otherwise not giving it to your body. So be sure to provide yourself with sufficient sodium. Now, my recommendation is to use iodized salt. For the main reason of, and this is another issue that a lot of women have health-wise, is because they're not doing enough salt at all, because they're concerned about water retention. They're not getting enough iodine, or like say if they do salt their food, they're getting like pink salt or something, they're not getting enough iodine, and then their thyroid has issues, because you need iodine to support thyroid function. Okay, so what ends up happening is a lot of women, and I'm sure you have friends or family unfortunately that have this, they end up going like hypothyroid, or they get Hashimoto's or something, end up with weight issues and stuff like that. We don't want any of that long term, because it takes a long time for that to manifest, but it's important, if we can prevent it, to be aware of it and to be conscious about it and intentional. So just make sure that when you do your salt, that you're doing iodized salt, so you get the iodine from it to support thyroid function. Okay, that's important. Okay, so potassium. Typically you want, like, for most people, like 2 parts potassium. The elemental letter for that is K on the periodic table, but just say this is calcium. 2 parts calcium for every 1 part sodium. Okay, so like 2 parts to 1 part salt. So say for example, if I have like, I don't know, 5 grams, or I guess for most people it'd be like 3 grams of salt. Let's say 3 grams of salt. We're gonna say like e.g. example 3 grams salt equals like, or let's say 2, because that's more moderate. 2 grams salt for the day equals like 4 grams potassium, something like that, if that makes sense. Now, the role of potassium, the good news is you don't need a supplement for this. Potassium is very rich or abundant in foods like meat, fruit, stuff like that, so you generally don't need a supplement for that, and I would actually recommend against any supplement that contains potassium by itself. Long story short is there's a lot of other stuff, micronutrients and things like that in fruit and meat and everything that you actually want along with the potassium to help it do its job properly. So if you were to go out of your way to get a dedicated potassium supplement, there's 2 things here. So one, dedicated potassium supplements by law are only ever going to be like 99 milligrams, which is like 2% of your recommended daily allowance. And the reason for that is like kind of like what we were talking about with proportions of electrolytes. So like if I have my sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and I have like, well, let's say this is potassium. So if I have like all this potassium up here, what ends up happening is two potentially negative things. So one, your body will try to eliminate it, and that, if you talk about like eliminating water, you're talking about the large intestine. It can cause digestive distress. We don't want that. But the main thing is if you have too much potassium, it acts as a so essentially it can act as a it affects the nervous system, where it can slow down the signal on the nerve, as opposed to sodium, which speeds it up. So think like muscular contraction versus muscular relaxation or stretching. The downside of that is if I have, like, imagine if I have a lot of potassium, like way too much for whatever reason, and say we're talking about the heart, and instead of it contracting, it relaxes and it relaxes again. That's an arrhythmia. So that can cause like heart palpitations and things like, we don't want that. So long story short, just don't have too much potassium. It's all about proportion, okay? 2 more and we're almost done. So calcium, I recommend having like 1 gram a day, 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams. And I recommend getting that from, we talked about how this was like, you know, just food. If you eat enough protein and vegetables and stuff, you're going to be fine with potassium. So just food, don't worry about it. Calcium, the source, I would recommend dairy if you can tolerate it. And if you can't, most people can at least tolerate Greek yogurt pretty well, because there's minimal lactose. And it's fermented in such a way with the probiotics that it'll actually help your digestion. That's what I do. So I would recommend, if you're able to, dairy and Greek yogurt. So that's what I would recommend there. Typically, you wouldn't want to do a calcium supplement by itself, but if you have to for whatever reason, like say you don't tolerate dairy and you're still looking for an option, a citrate would be good. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the creatine. The citrate is a delivery mechanism for the calcium. Like let's say you bought a calcium citrate supplement, and it would say that's what the citrate would be. It's citric acid, and chemically acids are water soluble, so it's more efficient of a delivery mechanism for the calcium, if that makes sense, as opposed to like a cheap like a Walmart calcium would be like called a calcium carbonate or something. You don't want that because it's not one. Okay, so one, it's not very well absorbed, but 2, the problem with an inefficient calcium supplement like that, long story short, is we have all these like imagine like receptors, right, that sit and pick up on things like minerals that you want to absorb. what can happen is with calcium carbonate is that it can, I wish I had both hands. Imagine like I'm putting my fist in my hand because I'm holding my phone right now, but like imagine like I'm occupying all the receptors with calcium because I'm having like an unnatural amount of it by way of an inefficient supplement. The downside of that is that when I occupy all those receptors, it can't pick up on other minerals like magnesium and zinc and things like that. So long story short, if you take an inefficient calcium supplement like a calcium carbonate or something, it can inhibit other mineral absorption like magnesium, zinc, etc., which will have a downstream negative effect. So long story short, I would do calcium a gram a day, 1,000 milligrams coming from Greek yogurt or dairy if you tolerate it. If you don't and you have to take a supplement, I would do a citrate, and and I would time it away from pardon me, from your multivitamin. Now I would only have this is a whole other video, but a multi you would only want to do in the AM, and we can go into that later. So I would have your calcium, I'm going to abbreviate it to calcium, in the PM, okay? Because we don't want to inhibit the mineral absorption from your multivitamin, if that kind of makes sense. Okay, last thing, magnesium. Most people, when it comes to this list of 4 electrolytes here, most people are most deficient, okay, in magnesium in terms of all 4 of these. And to be honest, you can get it in food, but it's a lot easier to get in a supplement form. So I would just take 400 milligrams, which is a standard amount for most people. 400 milligrams in the PM, like in the evening, right before bed, and I would do a glycinate form, Glycinate, okay, glycinate. I like, another arrow. I like the Nutricost brand. You can get that on Amazon, which is 2 scoops to get your 400 milligrams, okay? And a long story short on magnesium, we talked about how like speeds up the signal on the nerve, slows down the signal on the nerve. Calcium is kind of its own thing. It has like its role in bone mineral density, etc., but it's a key player to all 4 of these working. Magnesium is kind of like an intermediary between the potassium and sodium. So think again, muscle flexing and stretching. So it basically helps with your ability to discern the difference between flexing and stretching while moving, whether that's conscious or subconscious or unconscious rather. So long story short, it's a more muscular control, but there's also the cool thing about magnesium is that it has a role in like over 400 different functions in the body. So there's a lot of stuff that it does in terms of cognitive function, neuromuscular function, etc. So a lot of things which you can imagine if you're deficient would become compromised, which we don't want, okay? So so a lot of kind of miscellaneous value here. So if you're not already taking magnesium, highly recommend. And again, 400 milligrams in the evening. I like a glycinate form, and I like the brand Nutricost from Amazon. We don't sell it here, I wish we did. But yeah, anyway, that's the one that I use, and I just take it right before bed. And same thing kind of applies to what I was talking to you about with the how to take powders, like with the glutamine that we were talking about earlier. Just add just enough to a shaker or a bottle or whatever to where you have enough to wet it to get it down. Swish it around real quick and just shoot it before you go to bed is what I would do. So that's like the gist of how hydration works. So again, to reiterate, so water intake, avoid bottled water or purified or whatever unless it's spring. I like Ozarka. Try to shoot for a gallon a day, front load it to where you have it in the beginning of the day / mid-afternoon. Try and get it all in before too late in the evening. That way you're not peeing it out at night. Try and stagger your food and fluid intake to where you have either food or fluid that you wait at least 20 minutes before each one. That way it doesn't mix up. and cause you bloating and everything. You'll absorb your food and fluid a lot better. Your digestion and hydration will be a lot better if you space 20 minutes between. And then last, just get all your electrolytes in according to the amounts and sources that we were talking about. The very, very last thing is how you track all this, by the way. There's a app that you can get for free called Chronometer. That's Chronometer. On the App Store, it's free. If you plug in all your food, you can track not only your macronutrients, but also your micros, like vitamins, minerals, stuff like that, which is exactly what we're talking about here. So that way you can keep an eye on it. Now the goal here is find whatever foods, etc., supplements that you can plug in to check all your boxes and make everything green, and then just kind of make that, like, if you can, most of the time your daily like go-to, and you should find that your hydration and sweat situation will be optimized. So hopefully this helps.